Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do another fun history with the burning of Prospero. So, I've done two of these before, they're just sort of fun. Looks at events in 30k, or the Horus Heresy, so Games Workshop's historical, in quotes, prequel to 40k, which I much prefer, with the burning of Prospero. So this occurs before the events of the other two videos that I made, Isfahan 3 and 5. Technically this happens just before the heresy, a few months before the actual fighting starts, when Horus betrays the Emperor. I'm not going to give anything away in this one. It's maybe a little longer than the others. Just going to go through it as it comes in the Black Book and the various novels for a bit of fun and for something to do. So let's jump into it with a description of why Prospero happened in the first place. So before we can understand Prospero, we have to understand what a psyker is. So in the 40k, 30k universe, a psyker, well, there are three sort of types of psykers. Regular people who aren't psychic at all. Psyker refers to sort of having abilities to tap into the warp and use magic, essentially. It's not that simple, but yeah. So you've got normal people who don't have any psychic ability, which is the majority of humanity. Then you've got psykers, and there's different levels of psykers. There are people who can sort of bend spoons, and with all their focus they can bend a spoon. And then there are people that can snap titans in half and crack worlds open, who are extremely rare and very dangerous, and normally the subject of entire sort of stories. But the majority of psykers can do things like shoot lightning bolts, fireballs, put up shields, read people's minds, that sort of stuff. Your sort of general wizardy type things. Psykers are pretty dangerous inherently. They get their power by tapping into essentially what is hell. So, if you can imagine that, they are sort of little beacons for demonic activity to manifest in. So a psyker who sort of goes a bit too far with his powers can actually become possessed and killed that way, or he can open a little warp rift and allow a few demons to run out and cause problems, or he can open a permanent warp rift and kill himself and everyone around him, and then have a planet descend into literal space hell. So psykers are dangerous when they're not properly controlled and used. And so one of the things the Imperium does is they round up psykers, and they don't just put them to death. They use them in combat. The battle psykers, the Space Marines use psykers, as we'll get into later. Every ship in the Imperium has a psyker on it called an astropath. What the astropaths do is they basically look at Terra, which is Earth, which has a beacon on it that shines in the warp powered by the Emperor, and other psykers who keep the beacon going, which involves sort of them burning out over time and they get replaced. Although it's not super dark as it sounds. So the light, the astropathic choir keeps the astronomicon going, so the navigators can see it and use it to sort of as a lighthouse beacon to navigate in the warp, using it as a reference point. So psykers are critical to humanity moving anywhere in space. The way humanity moves through space is it tears open reality, goes into hell, travels short distances quickly, or the space and time don't exist outside of the universe, so there's sort of a tear open the universe, leave it into what essentially is full of demons and evil stuff. Protect yourself with Geller fields, so protective fields that keep everything out. Travel a short distance, open another hole, and then come out somewhere in the galaxy, much further away than you actually traveled. So it sort of creates, it fixes, it's sort of the warp drive system, the what do they call it in Star Wars, the hyperdrive system. But instead of just compressing particles or moving at the speed of light, you leave the universe, pop back in. And then problems can happen when you're in the warp. If your Geller field fails, everybody dies badly, really badly, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of this. Anyway, psykers are necessary, but incredibly dangerous. The Imperium has these things called the Black Ships, which go around collecting psykers from planets. They're very rare. Psykers are normally 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million sort of people. Very rare to have psykers. It's sort of semi-genetic as well. So if you have a population of psykers, they have children who are psykers, which we're going to see with the people of Tisga and Prospero, which is a city on Prospero. Anyway. So yes, psykers are incredibly dangerous, but necessary elements of the Imperium. So you have regular people who aren't psykers, and then blanks. So blanks are the opposite of psykers in that a human being is sort of like a candle in the warp. It's sort of, the human soul burns like a little candle. The psyker is like a giant strobing beacon in the warp, which is why they're more vulnerable to attacks. And a blank is no presence at all, or an anti-presence even. Blanks, also called soulless or pariah, essentially nullify warp and psychic abilities near them. They're hated by people, because humans naturally have a soul, and the soulless or the blanks don't. And so they're called pariahs because they are pariahs. So they're disliked and hated. Generally, just naturally, people just don't like them because of the effect they give off. Generally, pariahs are also picked up and removed, almost always. They're so rare, even rarer than psykers. And pariahs crew the black ships, which go around picking up psykers, obviously, because you've got these anti-psykers dealing with psykers. Pariahs also can become a sort of assassin with this giant skull cannon mask thing, called a Calexis, which is pretty cool. Or they can join the Silent Sisterhood, which we'll talk about later. Blanks are incredibly effective to use against demons and warp entities and psykers, because they shut down psychic powers, but they also sort of banish minor demons just by being near them. They can interrupt any sort of telepathic links with sort of slave. There are some sort of slave Xenos in 30k that dominate minds, and blanks can sort of sever that. So they're really useful, especially when you're going to be fighting psykers. Not spoiling anything here. So those are the ground rules. Let's get into the combatants and story. So we'll begin with the prelude to the burning of Prospero, with the trial of Magnus the Red. But before we can get to the trial, we have to actually talk about who Magnus is and why he's on trial. So Magnus is the Primarch of the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons. And you're going to hear the word Thousand Sons a lot. And it's sometimes going to come after a number. So I'm going to have to say like 50,000 Thousand Sons. So you get used to that. The 15th Legion, their colours are this sort of nice candy red. It's a little bit shiny. I like it. It's quite good. Not the blue of 40k. Forget all about the 40k stuff. Forget all about the dust and the rubric marines and all that sort of stuff. We're talking about human beings, or space marines, in this sort of armour. Every Thousand Sons is a psyker, although their level of psychic ability is varied. Most of them are of that extremely low-level variety that I talked about earlier. So, minor ability to sort of see a glimpse of the future now and then, or they can sort of use all their energy to sort of move a ball across the table, that sort of stuff. But a lot of them do have pretty powerful psychic abilities, shooting flames, putting up force field shields, all that sort of thing. They're called the Thousand Sons because when the Emperor created them as a legion, it was a hand-picked unit, basically picked for psychic potential, which he got up to 1,000 strong, called them the Thousand Sons, and then basically set them off on the Great Crusade. Although they didn't do much fighting in the early parts. They started developing their psychic powers during the Great Crusade. Not many of them knew they were psykers when they set out, but they started to develop them. And they got to a planet called Bezant, where on Bezant, the first of the flesh changing happened. Flesh changing happens to the Thousand Sons when they basically lose control of their power. The cells of their body rearrange themselves, and they turn into a chaos spawn. They call it just a flesh change monster, but we would know it as a chaos spawn, which essentially is just a mass of matter with a certain amount of legs that always changes, and big tentacles and teeth and eyes and claws and everything. Everyone's different. The whole thing is it's a constantly changing mass of chaos energy, or not chaos energy, chaotic flesh, and it's sort of a demonic thing. You don't want to become one. They go instantly insane. You trap like that forever. It's an immortal hellish, suffering existence. And they swore the Byzantine oath, B-E-Z oath, basically to keep it a secret. They kept the flesh change a secret from everybody. This is the thing that the legions do when they find out they've got a critical problem. They keep it a secret for fear of basically being wiped out or being recalled or stigmatized or any of that sort of thing. The Blood Angels do the same thing. We're going to see the Space Wolves do a similar thing in the future, but that's not for now. When Magnus found them, the flesh change was still something that happened rarely. When someone overtapped their powers, or it could happen when you were just using them normally, but that was more rare. But Magnus went into the warp and struck a deal with a warp entity, which most people assume is Tzeentch, the god of change, and of plotting and planning and scheming, where Magnus gave up his eye to save his legion, sort of Odin-esque, Odin style. So Magnus, one-eyed, Magnus the Cyclops, the Crimson King, he's got various names. He looks like this with his big horn nipples on his armor there, which is just fantastic. And Magnus divides the Thousand Sons into 9 fellowships, so sort of 9 big companies. The Death Guard have 7 great companies, 7 battle companies, I think they call it. Anyway, the Space Wolves have 13 great companies, and the Thousand Sons have 9 fellowships. So these are tens of thousands of Marines in an administrative unit, basically. They're also divided into a bunch of cults. There are 5 cults that the more psychically active members belong to. The cults are mixed all throughout the different fellowships, and just because you're a member of one cult doesn't mean you can't possess some powers from another. So Ahriman, who is the head of the Corvidae, which we'll get to, is about divination and seeing the future, but he can also throw fireballs and put up shields. He's just more specialized in the cult practice than the other ones. So let's look at the 5 cults of the Thousand Sons. The Corvidae, led by Ahriman, are a divination cult, so they scry the future. And one of the things Ahriman talks about in A Thousand Sons, one of the primary novels that deals with the Thousand Sons, is that seeing the future is easy for him and for his cult, although it gets harder towards the start of the Horus Heresy. As the heresy gets closer, all races' visions of the future get harder and harder, because he wouldn't want to spoil it. But he's like, seeing the future is easy, it's seeing the right future that's hard. You can see all the different possibilities, but which one is actually going to be the case, or which ones are even reasonable? You know, or, I mean, a clown car could fall from the sky and blow up, and then the whole world catches on fire. I mean, that's a future you can see, but is it going to happen? So it's sort of divinizing, rationalizing, sorting, putting them all together, and he says that only an Astartes mind, the sort of superhuman brain of a space marine, can really cope with the amount of work that's involved in divinization and that sort of thing. So yes, the Corvidae are your future predicting, divinizing seers. Next are the Pyrae, led by Calth. They specialize in offensive psychic powers and fire, especially. Throwing lightning bolts, blazing fireballs, general offensive attacks, just offensive, raw, magical attacks. Although other people can do it too, they're the specialists in it. They're the ones that are really, really good at it. The Raptora, led by Phocis Takar, specialize in telekinesis and kind shields. So this is your sort of putting up a barrier in between you and the enemy, so that bullets, you can put a shield between you and them to block bullets, to block explosions, to block falling rubble and masonry, to sort of, this sort of thing, putting up a sort of a shield with your psychic abilities and various small telekinetic things, moving objects in the world. You can move stones out of the way and that sort of stuff. The Pavoni, led by Hathor Mart, biomancy and flesh crafting. So biomancy, strengthening your own muscles with the force, with the warp, using the psychic powers to strengthen your muscles, punch harder, run faster, jump higher, modifying your own facial features, your own body, with psychic powers. These are the ones who are said to be sort of a little more vain, a little more focused on sort of more beauty and the peak physical condition. And the Athenians, I think I've said that right, led by Balak Uthizar, are telepaths. Although when you say telepaths, they can't They can read minds to a certain degree, but they can't control people with their mind. They can insert fake visions. They can sort of come into someone's mind and block out something. So, for example, if you were, say, trying to obscure a gun position from someone, they can telepathically enter the person's mind and sort of blot out the gun position up there so they wouldn't actually see it. As you can see, it's all sort of structured. It's a pretty, it's a sort of a tight magic system. It's not too loose, but there is sort of overlap between them all. Anyway, those are the Thousand Sons, or the Thousand Sons magic anyway. The Thousand Sons are pretty open with their use of psychic powers. Sun's homeworld is Prospero, on which the biggest city is Tizca. Tizca, basically everybody on Prospero is a psyker of some level, and the Thousand Sons are very open with their use of psychic powers, in combat and out of combat. Ahriman observes guys cleaning bolt guns by just psychically getting all the mud out, cleaning the gun, taking it apart, putting it back together with their mind. They order at restaurants with their psychic powers. The Remembrances, which are humans who come to document the Great Crusade, poets, artists, photographers, that sort of thing. When they join the Thousand Sons Legion, as every legion gets Remembrances, except a few, the Thousand Sons made sure they got psychically active Remembrances, or mostly did. And when these Remembrances go to Tizca, they sit down and one of them goes, in their own head they say, I think I might like the coffee and muffin, and then the waitress brings it out immediately without them ordering. So it's a very psychic culture. They sort of rely a little too much sometimes on their psychic abilities. Ahriman worries, does this guy actually know how to clean a bolt gun, or does he only know how to take it apart with his mind? Does this guy actually know how to perform the task that he's doing psychically with his own two hands? So most of them aren't super psychically active, but they can do small, simple things. And Magnus, who is an incredibly powerful psychic himself, worked with his brothers who are not psychics, Sanguinius and Jagatai Khan, the head of the Primarch of the Blood Angels and the White Scars, to set up something called the Librarius. So the Librarius is a grouping of the psykers within the Legion. So the Thousand Sons are a bit unique in that their Librarius is massive. But other legions, like the Ultramarines, have a Librarius with psychically active Marines in it. It's called a Librarius because these Marines are given access to the library of wealth of information and then the records of the chapter sort of thing. Librarians serve with most chapters. Some of them refuse to have librarians, like Mortarion, who we'll see in a minute. We've seen him in the Istvan 3 video. Perturabo, we've seen in the Istvan 5 video, also didn't like librarians. Most legions had a librarius. Even if they weren't super pro-psyker, they did it because they saw it was useful. It was useful to have these guys who can hurl fireballs from their hands in your legion. But of course, Mortarion hated that sort of psychic stuff. Some legions had a librarius, but they didn't call it that. So the White Scars technically have a librarius, but their librarians are more focused on sort of elemental magic or psychic abilities. So they use the sky to generate a lot of their power, and they're called Storm Seers, not librarians. The Space Wolves also... The Space Wolves don't have a librarius, and they're dead against the idea, but they have psykers, but they don't think they're psykers. So the way the warp and magic works, I know it's a long introduction for something, but it's critical to understand all this stuff before we can get into the shooting and the mayhem. The way the warp works is people's beliefs in reality shape unreality, or the way that unreality interacts with them. So every single Space Wolf and person on Fenris, which is the Space Wolf home planet, we'll get to that, believes that the Rune Priests, which are their psykers, aren't actually using the warp to generate their psychic powers. They believe they're generating their powers from Fenris itself, from the planet, from the people and the culture and everything like that. So their psychic powers are pretty much all driven towards space Viking type stuff, throwing giant shards of ice at people, that sort of thing. They're not as refined. They're much safer to use. Proper psycho type things. Anyway, Anyway, the long and short of this is that legions have psykers. Some legions put their psykers into a librarius. Some legions forbade them from using their powers at all. Librarius is up and running. Librarians are operating in the legions. Psychic powers are a natural part of the Space Marines. And the Thousand Sons sort of accomplish their goal of normalizing what a lot of people see as these mutant witches that are running around, these sorcerers. The Thousand Sons don't really understand the warp, though. It's described in the book, A Thousand Sons, again, as the Great Ocean. So it's like an ocean you can swim in and gain knowledge from. It's sort of like the ocean in this video right here, or this video, or this one, where it's full of bloodthirsty, murderous, sentient, vicious, psychopathic sharks. It's like the ocean, but if seahorses wanted to torture your soul for eternity, and had the ability to do so. It's just a brutal, evil place filled with the all of humanity's nightmares, or all races' nightmares. The warp is dangerous. It is incredibly dangerous. It is filled with demonic entities who will take any chance they can get to come out into reality and just kill for the sense of experiencing pleasure or spreading pain. Or we've been through the sort of various chaos entities before in the other videos. Sort of I've hinted at that, but you don't want to mess with it because it is dangerous. But part of the pact that Magnus struck with what is assumed to be Tzeentch sort of protected the Thousand Sons because there was a plan to bring them over to the service of Tzeentch. To the point where each Thousand Sons sorcerer, each Thousand Sons psyker, I shouldn't say sorcerer, had a demonic, minor demonic tutor called a tutelary, which sounds insane, but they just saw that as like a helpful little warp pet. It's like, yeah, I'm tapping into this great ocean, and look, I found a helpful little, like, starfish who's going to teach me about the great ocean and tell me all of the secrets of the great ocean. It's like, it's a crazy demon, bro, don't listen to it. These things are full-on demonic entities, and they're like, hey, what do you think I should do? How should I improve my force lightning abilities type stuff? And they take advice from these things. So, the Thousand Sons, once they've got psychers established in the legions, go a bit too far. They start pushing their abilities. They take a lot of liberties. Magnus basically leaves Leman Russ hanging for months and months and months. He's saying, look, I need reinforcements. I need you to come here and deal with this with me. And Magnus is just exploring a planet for the sake of finding a big pyramid-looking thing. To find a webway gate that the Emperor already knows exists. The Thousand Sons also repeatedly value knowledge. So instead of destroying alien or rogue human libraries full of this sort of mystical occult knowledge that is actually really, really dangerous and you probably should burn immediately, the Thousand Sons have pissed off a number of legions by basically either landing troops next to these libraries to get things out of it, or sort of almost attacking, but not really attacking, but getting in the way of legions to protect these places. They've annoyed many legions, including the Word Bearers and the Space Wolves with this. You can read about that in A Thousand Sons and Prospero Burns, the two great novels. And it all sort of comes to the head when Space Wolves, including, I think Leman Russ was there, but don't quote me on that, Space Wolves witness a flesh change. The flesh change had gone away, and all of a sudden, one of the Marines just goes way too far, and he changes. The Space Wolves, that's the final straw for them. These Thousand Sons have pissed them off. They're already anti-Psyker. They've been working with Mutaran and a few other the anti-Psyker Primarchs for years to try and stop this sort of stuff. And they demand that the Emperor do something about it. And so the Emperor calls the Council of Nicaea. So the Council of Nicaea, also known as the Trial of Magnus the Red, more internally known as the Trial of Magnus the Red by the Thousand Sons, is basically the Emperor saying, look, we're going to answer this Psyker issue right now. Everybody is going to come to this planet, or as many as could. The Fabricator General of Mars was there, head of the Imperial Navy, head of the Imperial Army, they hadn't split yet. High Lords of Terror came, various other representatives. Valdor was there. Genetia Kroll was there, who was the head of the Silent Sisters. I'll talk about them later, don't worry. The Emperor himself stood in judgment over it. The Emperor is probably the most powerful human psyker in the galaxy, along with Malkador, his regent, who is another incredibly powerful psyker. Many Primarchs came, but not all. Jagatai Khan wasn't there, who was one of the big advocates for the Librarius program in the first place. But the main two who were there were Mortarion, who was the anti-Psyker party spokesman, and Magnus, who was the pro-Psyker party spokesman. So, one of the things that's unspoken, but we know as sort of outsiders, is the Emperor is trying to wean humanity off the warp. The warp is vital for humanity's existence at this point, but the Emperor is secretly working on a webway project to tap into... the Eldar had built basically tunnels through the warp. And the Emperor is figuring out a way for humanity to gain access to them. If human beings can gain access to the webways, they don't need the warp anymore, which means they can stop using it, which will take away a lot of its power. Humanity can be weaned off the Psykers, the reliance on Psykers. That'll also stop a lot of the warp power. The Emperor is actively trying to eliminate all religion, which he's using as a way to basically starve Chaos Gods of worship. Although we know religion has power in 40k, especially the Imperial religion where the Emperor is worshipped as a god. So there's a growing cult of Emperor worship, which is sort of creates a nice tension between the whole religion isn't real in 40k versus it's actually real and powerful, but bad religion is also just as bad. So there's this dichotomy going on at the same time. Magnus also has gone way too far. He needs to be reined in. Magnus he's basically just turned his legion into his own. I can do whatever I want. He's demonstrated he doesn't understand what he's tapping into. And the Emperor's afraid to explain to him what's actually out there, because he's kept the Chaos Gods hidden from everybody. Because if nobody knows they exist, no one can worship them. No one can worship them, they'll basically starve. On a side note, this is one of the things that pissed Perturabo off, one of many things, is that the Emperor asked him to build the palace where they had the trial. And so Perturabo, who has had these, one of the things he does is he designs things and never builds them, because no one ever asks him to do it, because he's a child. He's a petulant child, the head of the Iron Warriors 4th Legion. We've talked about him in the Istvan 5 video. So he's asked to build this great palace, and all it's used for is to hold a trial for one of his brothers, which pisses him off to no end. Which I find funny, even though I'm an Iron Warriors player, sorry. So the Space Wolves provide secret security forces in the literal sense of the word. They are completely secret. Their presence there is unknown. The Silent Sisterhood is also present. Again, we'll get to them later. Basically, they're blanks. And they basically surround the Space Wolves and are all through them to block them out psychically. So nobody can know that they're there if they don't visibly see them. Mortarion gives his speech, which is not worth going into. Magnus goes basically and lies to everybody. He gives an allegory of Plato's cave, which is, I won't explain Plato's cave, look it up. It's to do with the way knowledge works, ontological stuff. Anyway, in Magnus's version of Plato's cave, the people who leave the cave to discover the world outside, the world of the forms, in Plato's cave's actual version, they come back in and they enlighten all of humanity, and they bring everybody with them outside into the realm of the forms, which is not Plato's idea at all. The Emperor, who was alive before Plato was even born, knows this, sees it immediately as this BS lie that Magnus is trying to gaslight everybody with, to essentially say, look how great I am. I'm here to bring all of you into the realm of enlightenment and knowledge, and you'll all love me by doing this. Join me outside of the cave, you cave-dwelling morons. When really, Magnus is just as in the cave as anybody else. So, the Emperor issues his ruling, which I will insert a recording of now.
Hear now the words of my ruling. I am not blind to the needs of the Imperium, but nor am I blind to the realities of the hearts of men. I hear men speak of knowledge and power as though they are abstract concepts to be employed as simply as a sword or gun. They are not. Power is a living force, and the danger with power is obsession. A man who attains a measure of power will find it comes to dominate his life, until all he can think of is the acquisition of more. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but few can stand the ultimate test of character, that of wielding power without succumbing to its darker temptations. Peering into the darkness to gain knowledge of the warp is fraught with peril, for it is an inconstant place of shifting reality, capricious lies, and untruths. The seeker after truth must have a care he is not deceived, for false knowledge is far more dangerous than ignorance. All men wish to possess knowledge, but few are willing to pay the price. Always men will seek to take the shortcut, the quick route to power, and it is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that will lure him to evil ways. True knowledge is gained only after the acquisition of wisdom. Without wisdom, a powerful person does not become more powerful, he becomes reckless. His power will turn on him and eventually destroy all he has built. I have walked paths no man can know and faced the unnameable creatures of the warp. I understand all too well the secrets and dangers that lurk in its hidden darkness. Such things are not for lesser minds to know, no matter how powerful or knowledgeable they believe themselves to be. The secrets I have shared serve as warnings, not enticements to explore further. Only death and damnation await those who pry too deeply into secrets not meant for mortals. I see now I have allowed my sons to delve too profoundly into matters I never should have permitted them to know even existed. Let it be known that no one shall suffer censure, for this conclave is to serve unity, not discord. But no more shall the threat of sorcery be allowed to taint the warriors of the Astartes. Henceforth it is my will that no legion will maintain a librarius department. All its warriors and instructors must be returned to the battle companies and never again employ any psychic powers. Woe betide he who ignores my warning or breaks faith with me, he shall be my enemy, and I will visit such destruction upon him and all his followers that, until the end of all things, he shall rue the day he turned from my light.
Not all the legions actually cared. The Night Lords disbanded the Librarius, but they didn't stop any of the librarians from using their psychic powers, because the Night Lords don't care about anything. The White Scars openly just kept the Librarius because they weren't even at Nicaea, so they just, we haven't heard about this. I don't know. I'm just going to do whatever I want. They're Stormseers, stop us. And Nicaea wasn't really enforced. It was in some legions. The Imperial Fists locked their librarians up in the Phalanx, their big battle fortress starship thing, and they imprisoned them there for years. The Ultramarines disbanded them and forbade them to use their psychic powers, so did the Blood Angels and the Dark Angels. Some chapters instituted the word-bearer practice of having chaplains to enforce the Edict of Nicaea, to keep an eye on the old librarians. It differed from chapter to chapter. The Thousand Sons openly ignored it, and they didn't care. Well, I say they openly ignored it. They toned back their warp usage, their psychic usage, but they also didn't openly deny that they were a legion of psychers, essentially. They kept it hidden to a degree, which the Emperor was okay with, because remember, one of his goals was to just sort of tone it back a little, wean people off the reliance of warp and psychic powers. Just tone it back, be safe with it. So really, the goals were all accomplished from most sides. Magnus took it as a personal insult, immediately took his legion straight away from Nicaea in a hissy fit, basically. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. So that is the introduction to the burning of Prospero, with the trial of Magnus the Red and the Council of Nicaea, which is the same thing. Next, we will get into the immediate reason that Prospero was attacked by the censure host, and look at the opening moves of the Battle of Tisga. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.